When I announced my intention to resign, Sophie Bennett only smirked with a sneer, a smile that carried more contempt than surprise. I didn't react, just looked at her calmly, my eyes speaking for me. Our conversation revolved around BrightPath Solutions' new restructuring policy, a euphemism for cutting labor costs, particularly targeting long-term employees like me, those they deemed overpaid veterans and milking overtime pay. Nathan Carter, the head of the tax department, didn't hide his satisfaction with the plan, as if each person eliminated was a small victory. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I stood in the office where cold white lights cast over rows of neat desks, no longer a familiar place. After 37 years of dedication, I was treated like an excess expense, but I walked away without bowing my head. I'm Ethan Harper, 59 years old, a veteran employee at BrightPath Solutions, a tax and administrative services company located on a bustling street in Seattle, Washington. I managed 45 tax clients, from small bakeries in Capitol Hill to family businesses in the suburbs. My job wasn't just processing paperwork, but finding tax strategies that saved clients millions of dollars. My small apartment in Capitol Hill, with windows overlooking Seattle's rain-soaked streets, was where I returned each night, often after long overtime hours. Divorced long ago, with no children, BrightPath had become the center of my life, until everything changed. BrightPath used to be a friendly place, where colleagues worked like a family. We helped small and medium businesses handle administrative paperwork and tax consulting, ensuring they avoided trouble with U.S. tax authorities. But recently, pressure from low-cost competitors had stressed the leadership. Meetings about cost-cutting became more frequent, and I started noticing scrutinizing glances from some younger colleagues. They looked at me, with my gray hair and meticulous work style, as something from the past. I didn't blame them. Technology is changing the tax industry, but I believed my experience and dedication still held irreplaceable value. That day, I decided to talk to Nathan about my intention to resign, not because I wanted to leave, but because the pressure from constant criticism and an ever-growing workload was exhausting me. I stepped into Nathan's office. He was sitting behind his desk, eyes scanning his computer screen. Sophie stood nearby, holding a Starbucks coffee cup, her gaze sharp and cold. "Nathan," I began, my voice steady, "I'm thinking about resigning. Maybe it's time for me to go." Sophie burst out laughing, her contemptuous smile making me clench my fists. "Resign, Mr. Harper? Who would need someone like you, working overtime, just to milk the company? Huh?" She smirked, her shrill voice echoing in the small room. Nathan looked up, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Ethan, have you heard about the cost-cutting plan? Your overtime, 80 hours a month, is a problem. The company can't keep supporting people who exploit overtime pay like that." He emphasized exploit with a triumphant air, as if he'd just won a game. I said nothing. My eyes locked onto Nathan's, steady and sharp, as if to say I wasn't easily broken. I wanted to argue, to say that those overtime hours were because I had to handle their work, but I knew arguing now was pointless. I turned and left the room, Sophie's laughter still echoing behind me. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop, checking emails from clients. A letter from Mrs. Margaret Hayes, a longtime client, made me smile. "Ethan, you're always the most reliable." Those words were why I stayed, despite Nathan and Sophie targeting me. After the confrontation with Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett, I returned to my desk, but Sophie's mocking laughter still rang in my ears. I tried to focus on an email from Mrs. Margaret Hayes, a longtime client, but Nathan's words, exploiting overtime pay, clung to me like Seattle's rain on the office windows of BrightPath Solutions. I knew they weren't just mocking me, they wanted me gone, and the days that followed proved it more clearly than ever. Nathan, since becoming head of the tax department, had completely changed. He used to be a polite colleague, always seeking my advice on complex tax issues. But now, 3 months into his leadership role, Nathan had grown arrogant, his voice always carrying a superior tone. During tax department meetings, he started criticizing me openly. "Ethan, you need to work faster," he said in front of the team, his eyes sweeping over me with disdain. "We can't let one person drag the whole department down with their slow pace." I sat there, gripping my pen tightly, but didn't respond. I knew arguing would only make him gloat more. Sophie, Nathan's assistant, was even worse. She didn't just mock me in meetings, but spread rumors behind my back. Once, while I was reviewing files at the printer area, I overheard Sophie whispering to a young colleague, Mr. Harper is such a burden, working overtime just to seem busy, but he doesn't get anything done. She giggled, unaware I was standing behind the bookshelf. I turned around, my eyes locking onto Sophie. She flinched, but then smirked, as if daring me. I walked away, not wanting to waste energy on her childish games, but inside, I began to feel isolated. The real pressure came one late afternoon, when the office lights at Bright Path grew dim under the rain outside. I was about to leave when Nathan approached, tossing a massive stack of files onto my desk. "Ethan, finish these by the end of the month," he said, his voice cold. I looked at the files, towering like a paper skyscraper. "By the end of the month?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is a month's worth of work, Nathan. Why is it all on me?" He shrugged, a smug grin spreading. "You're the most experienced, right? Think of it as a chance to prove yourself. I'm off. Good luck." He turned and left the office, leaving me with the pile. I sat down, opened the first file, and my heart sank. Some of the documents were Sophie's responsibility, tax forms she should have handled weeks ago. I realized this wasn't accidental. They were deliberately cornering me, forcing me to work to exhaustion or make mistakes they could use against me. I sighed, my eyes scanning the now empty office. It was just me, and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. I started working, each page a challenge. I took careful notes, checked every number, knowing any error would be weaponized by Nathan and Sophie. By midnight, my eyes were burning, but I hadn't even cleared half the stack. I realized I couldn't meet the deadline without overtime, but overtime would only fuel Nathan's accusations of exploitation. I stood up, brewed a cup of coffee from the office machine, trying to stay alert. Seattle outside was still drenched in rain, the streetlights hazy like my mood. During those late-night hours, I began to see their plan more clearly. My tax expertise, the strategies I'd built over 37 years, from optimizing deductions to handling complex audits, threatened Nathan. He wasn't trusted by clients like I was, and that bothered him. Sophie, with her ambition to climb the company ladder, was just an accomplice, eager to please Nathan. They wanted me to retire, not because I was slow, but because I was a thorn in their side. I started keeping evidence. Emails from Nathan, assigning tasks at the last minute, notes on files that were Sophie's responsibility. I wasn't sure if they'd be useful, but I needed to be ready. I couldn't let them push me out of Bright Path without a fight. I thought of Mrs. Margaret Hayes and other clients who sent thank you letters, calling me their tax hero. They were why I stayed, despite the growing pressure. The days after Nathan Carter dumped that stack of files on my desk, the pressure at Bright Path Solutions seemed to double. I sat at my desk, the Seattle office lights shining on pages thick with numbers, but my mind was racing. The sound of rain falling outside, a familiar Seattle hum, couldn't ease the heaviness in my heart. I knew Nathan and Sophie were targeting me, and each passing day made their plan clearer, to force me out of the company I'd given 37 years to. I couldn't show weakness. My clients, like Mrs. Margaret Hayes, had relied on me for decades. They trusted me not just for accurate tax filings, but for finding ways to save them money through strategies no software could replicate. Mrs. Hayes once said, "Ethan, you're the only one I trust to keep my company standing." Those words were like a flame, urging me to keep going, even as Nathan and Sophie tried to wear me down. I told myself, I don't work for them. I work for my clients. But every night, leaving the office in Seattle's rain, I felt like I was fighting a solitary battle. Bright Path Solutions had changed a lot since James Thornton became the new chairman. He was the son of Robert Thornton, the company's founder, who once called me his right hand. Robert valued me, even offered me the head of the tax department, but I declined to focus on clients. James was different, fresh from abroad. He brought modernization ideas, but lacked understanding of how the company ran. In meetings, I saw him lean toward Nathan, swayed by Nathan's charts and figures about optimizing costs. I didn't blame James. He was young, inexperienced, and easily influenced by Nathan. But it worried me. If James believed Nathan's lies, I'd be the first casualty. The pressure from Nathan and Sophie didn't stop at the files. In one tax department meeting, Nathan criticized me openly again. "Ethan, you need to improve your speed," he said, his tone superior. "Clients are complaining about your delayed files." I frowned, knowing it was a fabrication. No client had complained about me. In fact, Mrs. Hayes sent a thank you email just last week. I wanted to argue, but Sophie's smug grin, sitting beside Nathan, stopped me. She smirked, as if waiting for me to lose my cool. I clenched my fists under the table, my eyes locking onto Nathan, steady as the day he mocked my overtime. I couldn't let them see me falter. Outside the office, I started feeling isolated. Some younger colleagues avoided me, perhaps fearing involvement in this silent war. Only Claire Morgan, a longtime colleague, saw the injustice. Once as we brewed coffee in the office corner, Claire whispered, "Ethan, watch out for Nathan. He's trying to take you down." I nodded, thanking her, but deep down, I knew Claire's warning couldn't change the situation. I had to protect myself. Then one afternoon, as I reviewed files for Mrs. Hayes, my desk phone rang. It was James Thornton's secretary. "Mr. Harper, the chairman wants to see you now," she said, her voice flat but cold. My heart raced. I stood, adjusted my jacket, trying to stay calm. But as I left my desk, I saw Sophie in the hallway corner, her eyes flicking over me with a mocking smile. Nathan, passing by, patted her shoulder, both sharing a triumphant glance. I knew they'd planned something, and this meeting with James wasn't random. I pushed open James Thornton's office door, my heart pounding, but my gaze steady. Light from the large windows of Bright Path Solutions flooded the room, highlighting Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett standing by James's desk. They exchanged smug glances, Sophie's mocking smile sharp as a blade. I knew this meeting wasn't for discussion, but a trap carefully set by Nathan and Sophie. Seattle's rain still fell outside, each drop like a countdown to my remaining time at the company I'd given 37 years to. James, the new chairman, sat behind his desk, his youthful face stern. He looked at me, then turned to Nathan. "Let's get started," James said, his voice even but cold. Nathan stepped forward, holding a stack of documents, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Mr. Chairman, we've discussed cost-cutting," he began, his voice smooth as a rehearsed speech. "Ethan Harper is the problem. He works too slowly, dragging out tasks to rack up overtime, 80 hours a month, while others average around 15. This increases labor costs, impacting the entire tax department." I felt my blood boil. 80 hours of overtime. That was because I had to handle Nathan and Sophie's work, files they dumped on me at the last minute. I opened my mouth to protest, but Sophie cut in, her shrill voice dripping with contempt. "Exactly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Harper isn't just slow, he's causing client complaints for late filings. We can't let someone like him drag the team down." She smirked, her eyes sweeping over me, as if I were an outdated relic. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "James," I said, my voice firm, "those overtime hours aren't because I'm slow. I had to complete Nathan and Sophie's work, files they assigned at the last minute, including Sophie's responsibilities. No client has complained about me. In fact, Mrs. Margaret Hayes sent a thank you letter just last week." I locked eyes with James, hoping he'd question, investigate, but his gaze was cold, as if he'd already made up his mind. James sighed, shaking his head. "Ethan, I understand you have experience, but the numbers don't lie. 80 hours of overtime is unacceptable. The company can't keep someone working at that pace." He paused, his voice lowering. "I need you to resign by the end of this month." His words hit like a knife, slicing through my 37 years of dedication. I wanted to shout, to flip Nathan's documents, and expose the truth, but I knew it was futile. James was convinced, and Nathan and Sophie had won. I stood there, exhaustion washing over me. Nathan smiled, his triumph undisguised. Sophie stepped closer as I left the office, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Thanks for quitting, Mr. Harper. The company will be better without you." Her voice was sharp as a blade, her contemptuous smile making me clench my fists. I didn't respond, just looked at her, my gaze steady as it was the first day they mocked me. Nathan patted Sophie's shoulder, laughing loudly. "Cost-cutting is the right move, Sophie. Getting rid of people like Ethan is the way forward." I returned to my desk, my heart heavy. Seattle's rain still fell, the office lights dim like my mood. I opened my laptop, starting the handover process. I wrote letters to each client, from Mrs. Margaret Hayes to smaller businesses, informing them of my replacement. Each letter was a goodbye, but I kept my tone professional, hiding my personal pain. I called close clients, like Mrs. Hayes, to say farewell directly. "Ethan, why are you leaving?" she asked, her voice full of regret. I smiled over the phone, saying it was time for a new path. I didn't want clients to worry, though my heart ached. As I closed my laptop, I looked around the now empty office. Claire Morgan, a close colleague, approached, her eyes full of concern. "Ethan, this isn't fair," she whispered. I nodded, but said nothing. Fair or not, the decision was made. I felt a deep exhaustion, not just from 37 years of work, but from the betrayal of those I once called colleagues. After 37 years of dedication, I no longer had to face Nathan Carter's scornful glares or Sophie Bennett's mocking smiles. My small apartment in Capitol Hill became a sanctuary, where I could sit by the window, sip coffee, and watch raindrops slide down the glass. I savored the freedom, but deep down, a growing emptiness gnawed at me. Bright Path wasn't just a job, it was my life. And though Nathan and Sophie had forced me out, I still thought of clients like Mrs. Margaret Hayes, who called me their tax hero. In the first days after leaving, I tried building new routines. I tidied my apartment, sorting through Bright Path, mementos, a 30-year service award, a few client thank you letters. I walked the wet streets of Capitol Hill, stopping at a small cafe, where the scent of espresso mingled with Seattle's damp air. Espresso mingled with Seattle's damp air. I told myself, this was a chance to start over, to find a new path, but each time I recalled the letters I wrote to clients during the handover. My heart stung. I'd promised Mrs. Hayes, her new contact would care for her. As I did, but I wasn't sure that was true. Then one afternoon, as I read by the window, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Bright Path Solutions. I hesitated, thinking I'd completed all formalities, from Social Security to the handover. I let it ring, but it didn't stop. Call after call, Bright Path's number flashed, mixed with Nathan and Sophie's personal number. I frowned, a mix of curiosity and irritation stirring. Finally, I answered. James Thornton's voice came through, urgent and panicked. Ethan Harper, who are you exactly? I couldn't suppress a wry smile. Just an unemployed guy, the company fired. I replied, my tone even but laced with sarcasm. James, what's so urgent that you're calling me like this? James panted through the phone, as if he'd just run a lap around Seattle. Ethan, the company's collapsing. 49 clients, 49, called to cancel their contracts. They say they won't work with us without you. You have to come back, now. I sat up straight, the book in my hand, falling to the chair. 49 clients. I pictured Bright Path's office in chaos, phones ringing endlessly, staff scrambling in panic. I thought of Mrs. Margaret Hayes, likely leading this group of clients. She always said I was why she stayed with Bright Path, thanks to the tax strategies I tailored for her company. But 49 clients, that number stunned me. I felt a flicker of pride, mixed with doubt. Returned to Bright Path, where Nathan and Sophie had driven me out. I wasn't sure I wanted to step back into that fray. James, you fired me, I said, my voice calm. Why should I come back? James practically shouted through the phone. Ethan, I was wrong. I didn't know you were that important. Please, just come here, talk to us. We need you. His voice trembled, far from the confidence he'd shown at my dismissal meeting. I paused, looking out the window. Seattle's rain still fell, reminding me of the long days I'd fought for the company. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let Bright Path face the consequences, but another part, the part still tied to clients, to Mrs. Hayes, sparked curiosity. What had happened to make James this desperate? I sighed, rising from my chair. All right, James, I'll come, but don't expect me to stay. I hung up, grabbed my coat, and stepped onto Capitol Hill's wet streets. As I walked to Bright Path, rain soaked my shoulders, but I didn't care. I imagined Nathan and Sophie, probably panicking over the canceled contracts. They thought getting rid of me would make them shine, but now they were facing the fallout. The phones rang incessantly, mingling with the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett stood in the corner of the meeting room, their faces haggard, eyes shadowed as if they hadn't slept since I left. James Thornton, the new chairman, sat behind his desk, his eyes frantic but trying to maintain composure. I stood there, my coat still damp from Seattle's rain, a mix of curiosity and resolve in me. They'd driven me out, and now they needed me back. But I hadn't come to save them, came to see the truth. James stood, his voice shaky. Ethan, thank you for coming. The company, we're in a crisis. 49 clients canceled their contracts, and they made it clear they only work with you. Before I could respond, Nathan stepped forward, pointing at me, his eyes blazing with anger. What did you do, Ethan? You sabotaged us, didn't you? You contacted the clients, incited them to cancel. Sophie jumped in, her shrill voice piercing. Exactly. You did this for revenge, didn't you? How despicable. Her familiar mocking smile now trembled, betraying her desperation. I stayed silent, my eyes locking onto Nathan, then shifting to Sophie. I didn't need to shout or justify myself. The truth would speak for me. James, I began, my voice steady. I haven't contacted any clients since I left. They canceled because they don't trust anyone but me. I built relationships with them over 37 years, not just by processing files, but by designing tailored tax strategies for each one. Mrs. Margaret Hayes, for example, stayed with BrightPath because I saved her millions, not because of Nathan or Sophie. Nathan laughed, but it was forced. Your strategies, outdated. We have standardized processes based on new guidelines. You just overcomplicate things. I shook my head, not breaking eye contact. Nathan, if your processes are so effective, why did 49 clients cancel the moment I left? My question left Nathan speechless, his face paling. Sophie tried to interject, but James raised a hand for silence. Ethan, go on, he said, his tone serious. I took a deep breath, continuing. I worked 80 hours of overtime a month, not because I was slow, but because I had to handle Nathan and Sophie's work. Files Nathan dumped on my desk at the last minute, many of them Sophie's responsibility. I didn't complain, because I wanted clients to be satisfied. But they used that to slander me, to push me out of BrightPath. I pulled a stack of papers from my coat pocket, emails and notes I'd saved, proof of Nathan's unfair assignments. I placed them on James's desk, my gaze unwavering. Before James could review them, his desk phone rang. He answered, and I heard the familiar voice of Robert Thornton, James's father, BrightPath's former chairman, through the speaker. James, what are you doing with Ethan Harper? Robert said, his voice booming. Do you know Ethan is the heart of the tax department? He turned down the department head role to focus on clients. Without Ethan, BrightPath wouldn't have kept major clients like Margaret Hayes. You fired him because you listened to Nathan Carter? The room fell silent. Nathan and Sophie stood frozen, their faces ashen. James looked at me, his eyes full of regret. Ethan, I didn't know, he stammered. My father's right. I was wrong to trust Nathan and Sophie. He turned to them, his voice hardening. Nathan, Sophie, how do you explain dumping work on Ethan? And I just received receipts from accounting. Lavish dinners in downtown Seattle, claimed as company expenses. Anything to say? Nathan tried to defend himself, his voice trembling. Those were just client dinners, Mr. Chairman. But Sophie, now panicked, blurted. It was Nathan's idea. I just followed. James shook his head, pulling out another file. And there's talk of a romantic relationship between you two, violating company policy. I have enough evidence to terminate both of your contracts, effective immediately. Nathan and Sophie looked at each other, their eyes desperate. I stood there, feeling no triumph, only a deep exhaustion. James turned to me, his voice sincere. Ethan, I'm sorry. I was wrong to fire you. Please come back. BrightPath needs you. I looked at James, then at Nathan and Sophie, now staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Part of me wanted to agree, to return for clients like Mrs. Hayes, but I'd given BrightPath my life, and they'd betrayed me. James, I said, my voice calm, thank you for the apology, but I'm not coming back. I gave BrightPath 37 years, and now I want a new path. I turned and left the meeting room. Seattle's rain sounded through the windows, as if bidding me farewell. As I stepped onto the wet street, I felt a quiet pride. The truth had been revealed, and my worth was recognized. I didn't look back, but I knew the desperate eyes of Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett were fixed on my back. They'd thought pushing me out would make them shine, but now they faced the consequences of their actions. I walked onto Capitol Hill's wet streets, feeling relieved, but not vindictive. Justice, I realized, didn't need my intervention. It found the wrongdoers on its own. Right after the confrontation, James acted swiftly. He called Nathan and Sophie back to the office, his voice as cold as Seattle's rain. You're both terminated, effective immediately, James declared. According to Claire Morgan, my close colleague, Nathan tried to justify himself, his voice shaking. Mr. Chairman, it's just a misunderstanding. The receipts, I can explain. But James had enough evidence. Receipts from lavish restaurants in downtown Seattle, meals Nathan claimed as company expenses, but were actually for dates with Sophie. Moreover, rumors of their romantic relationship, which violated company policy, were confirmed through emails and tax department witnesses. Sophie, losing her usual arrogance for the first time, broke into tears. I was just following Nathan. I don't want to lose my job, she sobbed. But James was unmoved. You didn't just misuse expenses. You dumped work on Ethan and slandered him, James said, his voice firm. BrightPath doesn't tolerate such behavior. Nathan and Sophie left the office in silence, their faces pale, personal belongings hastily packed into cardboard boxes. Claire told me that as Sophie passed her desk, she kept her head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Justice, as Claire later said to me, had finally been served. But the consequences for Nathan and Sophie didn't end there. I heard that Nathan's wife, after discovering his relationship with Sophie, filed for divorce. Nathan faced a large financial settlement, plunging him into hardship. Seattle's tax industry is a tight-knit community, and news of Nathan's misconduct spread like wildfire. No company wanted to hire someone with his reputation. Eventually, I heard Nathan was working manual labor at a construction site in the suburbs. A shocking fall for a once arrogant tax department head. Sophie fared no better. One day, as I sipped coffee at a small Capitol Hill cafe, she appeared, her face gaunt, devoid of the smugness she once had. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice choked, "please help me. I can't find a job. I just wanted to do the right thing, to have a better life." I didn't really like Nathan. Her eyes were red, but I looked at her, my gaze steady as it was when she mocked me. "Sophie," I said calmly, "you chose your path. You and Nathan hurt not just me, but other colleagues too. These consequences are your own doing. You can't undo the past." Sophie bowed her head, tears falling onto the table. I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet weariness. I stood, leaving my half-finished coffee, and walked out. Seattle's rain soaked my shoulders, but I didn't mind. I thought of the days Nathan and Sophie criticized me, dumped unfair stacks of files on my desk, and laughed at me in front of the team. They'd thought I was weak, but now they were paying for their arrogance. Claire called me later, saying the tax department had stabilized after Nathan and Sophie left. "Ethan, you did the right thing," she said. "Everyone here knows how important you were." I smiled over the phone, thanking Claire. But in my heart, I was no longer tied to Bright Path. I'd given that company too much, and Nathan and Sophie's betrayal reminded me I needed a new path. They'd sown the wind, and now they reaped the whirlwind. I didn't need to seek revenge. The truth had done that for me. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not because they failed, but because my worth had been acknowledged. I sipped my coffee, my eyes glancing at Mrs. Margaret Hayes' letter on the table. She'd written, "Ethan, you're always the best." And I knew, whether Bright Path collapsed or not, I'd keep being myself. After the confrontation with Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett, after James Thornton's apology, I knew I couldn't go back. I'd given Bright Path 37 years, and though the truth was out, the wound of their betrayal lingered. I needed a new path, a place where I could work free from office politics or scornful glances. I declined James's offer to return, not out of resentment, but because I wanted freedom. An old friend, Mark, invited me to work at his small tax office in Bellevue, just a short drive from Seattle. I agreed, not for the money, but because I wanted to keep helping clients my way. Mark's office was a small space, filled with natural light, bookshelves packed with files, and the faint smell of coffee. There were no tense meetings or hidden agendas, like at Bright Path. Here, I could focus on the work I loved, turning complex numbers into opportunities for clients. One day, as I reviewed files at the office, Mrs. Margaret Hayes called. "Ethan, I heard you're working in Bellevue," she said, her voice warm. "If you open your own office, I'll be your first client." I smiled, touched by her trust. Her words sparked an idea in me, opening my own tax office. I started planning, learning from Mark about running a small business. I envisioned an office in Seattle, where I could serve clients without pressure from bosses or jealous colleagues. I wanted to work as a friend to clients, not a controlled employee. Each morning, as I stepped into Mark's office, I felt a new energy. Seattle's rain outside no longer felt heavy, but like a reminder that I'd survived the storm. I was no longer Bright Path's Ethan Harper, cornered by Nathan and Sophie. I was Ethan Harper, ready to start over, with 37 years of experience, and a heart still burning for my work. As I sat at my desk, looking at Mrs. Hayes' thank you letter, I knew I'd made the right choice. My second life had just begun, and I was excited for the journey ahead. Seattle, with its endless rain, would be where I'd write the next chapter of my story, not as a victim, but as a free man, doing what I loved, my way. The story of Ethan Harper at Bright Path Solutions reflects real challenges in today's U.S. workplace, where competition, cost-cutting pressure, and office politics often weigh on dedicated employees. Ethan, a 37-year veteran, was slandered and pushed out by Nathan Carter and Sophie Bennett because his expertise threatened their positions. This injustice, coupled with the new chairman James Thornton's ignorance, mirrors a common U.S. issue. Older workers are often undervalued, in environments prioritizing technology and instant results. Yet the 49 clients canceling contracts when Ethan left shows the true value of experience and personal relationships, something U.S. companies sometimes overlook in pursuit of short-term profits. Nathan and Sophie's downfall, from termination and divorce to struggling to find work in Seattle's tax industry, proves the consequences of unethical behavior, a persistent issue in U.S. workplace culture where personal ambition can overshadow integrity. The lesson Ethan Harper's story offers a vital lesson for life in the U.S. today. Stay true to your values and build genuine relationships, no matter how unfair the workplace. Ethan didn't buckle under Nathan and Sophie's harassment, choosing to maintain his dignity through steady gazes and dedicated work. This reminds us that in America's performance-driven culture, upholding professional ethics and loyalty to clients, like Ethan with Mrs. Margaret Hayes, creates lasting value. Ethan's act of keeping evidence, emails, notes is practical advice. Protect yourself with documentation in competitive workplaces where slander can happen. Nathan and Sophie's collapse from misusing Seattle dining expenses to losing their jobs shows that a lack of integrity brings severe consequences, especially in tight-knit U.S. industries like tax, where reputation spreads fast. Finally, Ethan's choice to reject BrightPath and open his own office in Bellevue teaches us that sometimes leaving a toxic environment is the path to freedom and meaning. Learn from Ethan, focus on your strengths, like his 37 years of experience, and don't fear starting over. In the U.S., where career changes are normal, daring to chase a second life, like Ethan, will open new opportunities, letting you live true to your values, no matter the challenges. Please subscribe to the channel to follow the journeys of people like Ethan Harper, overcoming injustice and rediscovering life's meaning. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video with more inspiring stories.